Hey, everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We're in December, we're in the Christmas season. So I'm trying to do a couple reviews of Christmas movies that are maybe not quite as well known. You know, as you're coming, It's a Wonderful Life, which itself was once not all that well known, or A Christmas Story, which itself was almost not that well known. Anyways, well, we got a good one today. This is one that I saw a few years back. I actually didn't know what I was heading into when I saw it. It happened on Fifth Avenue. I thought, okay, is this like some New York sort of maybe musical, Broadway comedy kind of thing? I had no idea. And no, it turns out to be a very touching, poignant little Christmas comedy, slice of life, maybe a little bit of drama in there as well. A nice piece of work all around, directed by Roy Del Ruth, who was a very solid director from the early days of Hollywood. I think he worked with Max Sennett at some point. Directed kind of a family favorite in my house, Topper Returns, which is kind of this screwball supernatural comedy. But made a solid little movie here. It hits on some things that are kind of timely today. In this case, the housing crisis that the U.S. was going through in post-World War II, in which actually I think human beings have been going through a housing crisis for about the last 10,000 years. It's one of those things like people complaining about inflation or taxes that you could see it in stuff from the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and on back. But more deeply, it's themes of poverty and wealth, and but not exactly in the way one might think. So let's get into it here. We'll bring up the little. There we go. Okay, and yeah, we're gonna probably have some spoilers coming up in this one, so I can more fully discuss the movie. It's an old movie. It's out there. It can be found. Well, anyways, let's get into the film itself. So we begin with a hobo, Aloysius T. McKeever, played by Victor Moore. He's accompanied by his dog Sam, and he's out and about, walking up to a. Here we go. Sorry, this is me doing the background stuff, trying to figure out how to make my slideshow work. He's walking through the streets of New York, and he ultimately comes up to a boarded-up mansion, the mansion of Michael J. O'Connor, the second richest man in the world. And he makes his way through this loose board in the fence with Sam, and down into this well, it's a manhole cover, but I'm assuming it just goes down into sort of the basement of this mansion, and makes his way into the mansion proper. Almost like he kind of owns the place. He doesn't seem like he hasn't done this before. And I'm jumping the gun a little bit there. We'll get to that guy in just a moment. So he goes through and he's turning on the lights and he's getting the place sort of prepped up. And then we switch scenes to an apartment building where everything's being cleared out. The place has been purchased by Michael J. O'Connor. He's going to build new corporate headquarters here. He's going to have the building torn down, and so everybody's being evicted. But one guy in particular does not want to be evicted, and he is played by, we're going to see him in just a minute, DaFore. I brought this guy up, though, actor that a lot of folks probably know, George Lloyd. People might remember him from I Accuse My Parents, which is a kind of a famous movie done by Mystery Science Theater 3000. He was an actor. He worked forever. There's a few familiar faces, but DaFore, also familiar from the TV show Hazel. He was neighbor of Ozzie and Harriet on their show. DaFore worked for a long time, did comedy type roles. Always played kind of kind of a friendly guy overall, although in Hazel, he's like, she drives him friggin' crazy. Hey, there's a Christmas connection. Hazel, she did the voice of Mrs. Claus in Year Without a Santa Claus. So DaFore plays Jim Bullock, and no, not Jim J. Bullock, Jim Bullock. He's a veteran, and he paid up, and he does not want to leave, but he's been evicted just the same, and he's not sure where he's going to go because, again, New York is in a housing crisis. This is movie was from 1947, so this is just after World War II. All these servicemen coming home, getting married, families trying to find a place to stay. This is a major theme, or at least a major driver of some of the plots in this film. So, other familiar faces in the folks who are trying to throw him out. We got Johnny Arthur, who I think best known for playing Darla's dad in a couple of the Little Rascals shorts. He was kind of the sissy guy who, is complaining to his wife, but mommy, anyways, yeah, even as a kid, I was like, what is up with that dude? Kind of crazy. We also get Perry White from Adventures of Superman. Here he's sporting a sweet mustache, John Hamilton. So they bring in some folks as DaFore, or we'll call him Jim, handcuffs himself to a bed so he can't be thrown out. They bring in some guys who literally just pick up the bed and carry him right out of the building. And he winds up sleeping on a park bench. And it's here that Jim meets Aloysius. Aloysius, now dressed up to the nines in Mr. O'Connor's finery, out walking the dog, he runs into this guy, and they start chatting about the housing problem and how McKeever has solved his housing problem, because apparently for the last 3 years he's been wintering at Mr. O'Connor's home in New York, while O'Connor goes south for the winter to warmer climes. And so since Sam takes a liking to Jim, he says, well, you know what? I'm going to invite you to stay with me. Now, initially, Jim doesn't know that this isn't actually a rich guy who owns a mansion. He has no idea. And so, but he says, okay, well, let's go. Although I think he's a little suspicious about the way that they enter the mansion. And he ultimately finds out what's going on. And he's just been kicked out of an apartment by this O'Connor guy. So he's like, yeah, let's stay in his house. That sounds great. So now we switch scenes again. We're still introducing all the characters that are going to be in this movie. But now we switch scenes to Michael J. O'Connor, the world's second richest man, at his winter home in Virginia. And he's in the middle of a big business meeting, talking to his people. He's going to develop this massive transportation node just outside of New York City. It's actually, I actually work in commercial real estate, and he's got this model of all these, like, the boats under these docks, and there's all these buildings, and then there's an airfield above it, and there's all these highways. And I'm going, that's actually pretty cool. That's actually pretty legit. I know, okay, so he's kind of the bad guy here in a way, but nice piece of engineering, actually. Nice piece of architecture. And so they're going to buy this abandoned army camp just outside of New York. And that's where they're going to develop this big deal. And so he gets this phone call. And it is somebody letting him know that his daughter has disappeared from her finishing school. Now, his daughter is, I think they say in this is like 25 years old. So we're not talking about a little girl. And this sounds like maybe it's not the first time this has happened. And so, okay, well, get the private eyes looking for her. We're going to find her. He's going to nip this in the bud. And he decides he's going back up to New York to look for her himself. So this is a little bit ahead of schedule for McKeever, who lets us know, hey, he leaves, for Virginia in like early December. I move in after he leaves. He comes back in March. I leave before he gets back. Nobody knows I've ever been here. So now we got a wrinkle. And what we also draw from this is that this is not a happy family, the O'Connors. There are problems here. He is divorced from his wife and doesn't want to bring her into this. And so we got a family with some issues. Well, the daughter, Trudy, shows up at the mansion one night to get some things. And again, not according to the plans of McKeever and now Jim, who are staying there. And they're kind of surprised by her. And of course, they don't know who she is. So they think that she's some woman who has, snuck into the mansion to steal this mink coat and maybe a few other items. And, but they're in a pickle. They can't really call the police, can they? Because they're there illegally as well. Now, she overhears them talking. And since she's trying to escape from her father and her family, she decides to go along with it. She tells them a story. No, I'm from Des Moines. I think it was Des Moines, Iowa. My father is a drunk and he beat me and I've run away from home and I have nowhere to go and I'm sorry and blah. So they say, okay. We'll let you stay here as well. And she says, I'm trying to get a job at this music store, demonstrating pianos, and that's why I needed a coat and yada yada. Okay, you can stay. And that night, the police arrive, a couple cops, to just make sure the mansion is okay. And so they'll hide in this ice locker while they take a look at the house and, clear it. But in that time, she gets to chat with Jim and she kind of takes a liking to Jim. So the next set of characters who are going to enter this little play. While Jim is out and about, he runs into some folks that he knows. A couple of wives of army buddies, ex-army buddies, who are living in a car at the moment while their husbands are trying to secure an apartment for them. And he goes up to see them and sadly spills the beans that they have families. And that's not going over well with the landlord. Oop, I went too far ahead, sorry. Thought I had a different picture of that landlord. The landlord is well-known actor from TV, from classic TV. Charles Lane usually plays kind of a sour guy. He was played Homer Bedloe on Petticoat Junction. Of course, one of the friends of Jim is played by Alan Hale Jr., famous as the Skipper. A lot of familiar faces in this movie that would go on to do other movies, but also do a lot of TV. And so, with Jim getting in there and mentioning the kids, didn't know, that loses them the apartment. And there's a great line there. What did he say? He goes, if they let you in, then everyone would start having children. And then what would happen to the human race? Which, kind of a prophetic statement, given that we're now in a point where people aren't having a lot of kids. And what is going to happen to the human race? Kind of interesting. So he says, well, hey, I got a place that you guys can stay. And so a few more people are now invited in. Of course, McKeever's like going, oh, this is getting out of hand. But, these guys, they have wives, they have little children, they have a baby. And, the baby's so cute. And McKeever can't, he's a generous guy. He's being generous with somebody else's property. But still, he's a generous guy. So he invites them in. So here's where the plot begins to thicken. O'Connor comes to New York, and he happens to see his daughter leaving that music store where she's gotten the job, and has a little conversation with her. And this is one thing that I like about this movie, because O'Connor, who I should mention, I didn't mention that before, played by Charles Ruggles himself, famous actor, did a lot of great stuff, did some Beverly Hillbillies as the sort of ne'er-do-well father-in-law of Milburn Drysdale, did the voiceovers for Aesop's Fables on the old, Rocky Bullwinkle show. A lot of movies. I love the dude. And you know what? Along with Victor Moore, who plays Aloysius McKeever, Edward Brophy, who's going to show up in the movie later, one of the great voices of classic Golden Age Hollywood. They had so many actors, and some actresses too, who just had these wonderful, distinct voices. They really had so much talent to work with in animation in the 50s, but mostly 60s and into the 70s. So some of these actors who just had these great, warm, rich, interesting voices. That's a side, but one of the things I really like about this movie is that even though O'Connor he's not a good guy exactly, he's not a monster. He's a man who has lost his way. There are definitely some overtones of the Scrooge story here, which thankfully not a remake of the Christmas Carol, because boy have we all seen that one probably enough, but it does capture some of those themes. And that'll be explored as the movie goes on. But I like the fact that this man, he's the captain of industry type, which is often just sort of a stereotype in these movies of the guy who barks orders and gets what he wants and I'm never wrong. There's a little bit of that to this character. But I think if you know Ruggles, that's not really the kind of character he's going to play ultimately. And he doesn't. He has a conversation with his daughter. Why did you leave school? Why did you run away? And she says, I've just been extremely unhappy since you and Mother divorced. Things were so good, and now they're not. You're in Virginia. She's in Miami Beach, I think it was. And I'm off at this finishing school, and I'm unhappy. And the man does genuinely care for his daughter. And so she lets spill what's going on at his mansion. And that's another point of this that I like. It doesn't turn into sort of this farce where they're all trying to hide what they're doing from this guy, which could have been fine, but it wouldn't have worked for the kind of movie they're doing here. Instead, he knows what's going on. And he actually agrees to go along with it. She wants him to meet this guy, Jim, that she's fallen in love with. Now, he actually kind of knows who Jim is a little bit because as Jim was being evicted, he got his picture taken. And he's quoted as calling O'Connor an octopus, a guy who's with his tentacles into everything, and he's this rich, evil guy, blah, 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 blah. Bad publicity. It's in the newspapers. And it doesn't occur to him right away, but he recognizes the guy when he sees him. And, of course, he doesn't like the guy because, he's taken his daughter away from him potentially, and for other reasons as well. But I do really like, though, that this man has some humanity, and I like that he says, okay, I'm going to pose also as this homeless guy so I can have my entry into this house and see what's going on. And that's where the plot thickens, even just a little bit more. And there's actually a really funny scene. Now, this movie, from a technical standpoint, you could say it has pacing issues, and it does. It has these kind of comedic set pieces that are not exactly intrusive to the film. They are story adjacent, although they don't necessarily drive the story. And they are genuinely funny. But they do it in a way when they show up, it's kind of like, okay, main actors stop for a minute, let this dude do something funny, and then you can restart the movie. So I can see from a technical aspect, people would say, it's a flaw in the film. It didn't bother me. It works. In this case, they go to this old clothes shop run by this guy, and to get him some old clothes so he'll look like maybe he's actually homeless. And he says, well, what do I get in trade in for my suit? And the guy goes, that's $6. That's a brand new tailored wool suit or suit. What do you mean? Well, that suit is made of wool. And you see, wool is going to bring in moths. And if I get moths, it means I got to stay here all night long so I can deal with the moths. And if I do that, my wife's going to be angry. The guy weaves this whole story about how really the introduction of this wool suit to his business could destroy his entire life. It's really funny. I enjoyed it. Among many reasons why you should watch this film. It does have some genuinely funny moments in it. So he gets his old clothes and has his little banter with this guy in his shop. And he ends up on a park bench. I think the parcel is his suit because he's like, I'm not giving it to this guy for $6. He ends up here, and it's arranged that Trudy will make sure that Jim and McKeever come across him. And she wants to take pity on this guy. Now, they're not too sure about this dude. Oh, this strange guy on this bench. But she convinces him, oh, look at him. He's shivering and he's hungry. We have to bring him in. Again, McKeever's kind of like, I can't let every bum in New York into this mansion, And, of course, O'Connor's not real happy about a lot of this as he's being, his house is being invaded. And McKeever's he's a little bit high hat about it, but in a funny way. But they do invite him into the house, where he is a bit of a disruptive element. He's often being lectured and chided by McKeever for his behavior, Mike, you're gonna have to help out with the dishes, and you got to stop blowing up at people. If you're gonna stay here, you got to be one of the family, sort of. And this is when I think the film really gets down to what it's about. Because in the O'Connor character, you have a man who, worked himself up from the bottom, and that's a really poignant story, especially back then. And this is again 1947, so you have a man who would have gone through the Depression, who would have gone through some really rough times to make himself into this very wealthy man. But what has he lost along the way? People could say the movie's a little sappy and a little schmaltzy, and I say we need more sappy and we need more schmaltzy in the world today because we are becoming disconnected from what's really important. We're getting our priorities screwed up. Well, humanity always has. That was kind of the message of why, of what Jesus was bringing to us, saying, hey, yeah, I know traditionally this is how we do things, but it's time to end some of these traditions, and we need to really understand what's truly important and what truly brings satisfaction, success, wealth into our lives. And we're going to get into that as we move on. So once again, the plot thickens. Now that we have assembled almost all of the key characters to this little drama, into this mansion, over dinner, they start talking about the army buddies, about what are we going to do? How are we going to find places to live? What are we going to find work? And McKeever says, well, listen, you kind of have to make your own opportunities. You got to, if you want to succeed in business, you got to figure out what people want and you got to give it to them. And they hit on this idea. What people want right now is housing. What if we take an old army camp and we convert the barracks into homes? And presto, we got homes for a lot of people, and we can make some money doing it. And so they hatch this whole scheme we'll get a bunch of other army guys together. They'll all invest in this project, and that's how we'll bankroll this thing. And we're going to buy this abandoned army camp just outside of New York, where we're going to do this. And of course, that's the same army camp that O'Connor wants to turn into this big transportation node. And so there's another complication to the plot. And I'm going to go ahead now, because we're about at this point, we're well into the movie. We're going to put up the spoilers alert sign here as we move forward into the film. So at this point, if you want to stop and go watch the movie, go right ahead. Maybe come back and hear my thoughts about it. So O'Connor has agreed to go along with this little charade, but he isn't happy about it, and Trudy decides to call in her mother. Now, when we first meet her mother, she's in very expensive clothes. She's very much the wealthy, divorcee, I guess was the word people used back in the day. And again, you see the humanity here of these characters. She didn't entirely want to divorce her husband, but she herself was very unhappy about his obsession with the business. And you get the feeling she's not entirely happy about how her life has gone. So she agrees to also enter the mansion, seemingly as somebody in need of shelter. And so we get the husband and wife, Mike and Mary, coming back together. Nice scene as she's cooking this stew in the kitchen, and he smells it when he comes into the house. And he's like, "Oh, I haven't smelled that in years. Oh man, my ex-wife used to cook that, and it was the most fantastic thing I ever had." And he comes in, runs into her, and of course there's immediately some argument, and Trudy kind of calms it down. But what we're doing here, again, somewhat like in the Scrooge story, but without the ghosts and flashbacks, we're learning about how O'Connor has come to this point in his life with an ex-wife, with a daughter who kind of wants to escape him, although really wants to redeem him, with people taking advantage of him, with these veterans who can't stand the guy because of what he sort of represents to them. How did he get here, and can this man be redeemed? So they have their little argument, but there's also some touching elements to it. But they're still at a loggerhead at this point. And so the story goes on. At this point, O'Connor is still trying to take control of the situation. He wants Jim gone. He wants his daughter back. He's not yet ready to get his wife back, although there's definitely that element of the character there. So he's sort of scheming at this point, and he's still trying to secure this army camp for his deal because now somebody's bidding against him. So, bid it up. But we also now get to see kind of a nice bit of the McKeever character as he says, "Hey, man, we're going through the food here pretty quick in this mansion." He goes, "When I stay here by myself with Sam, they don't even know I've been here. I don't take enough to even be noticed." But he goes, "Mike, we're going to have to get jobs. We got to refill this pantry, Mike, I'm not doing manual labor." But this is a key, because that manual labor, because he ends up doing it. He does end up doing it. It's shoveling these sidewalks. He, as I say, he started as a poor man, and he's built himself up. But in the process of gaining material wealth, he's lost the riches of his soul. How does he get them back? Well, he has to go back in a way to where he started. And this is actually part of it. He's kind of PO'd that he has to do the manual labor, but he's kind of enjoying it a little bit too. He's never felt better. And it's sort of like, when you maybe gone too far down the wrong track, you don't double down and keep going forward. You need to sometimes stop and go back and say, okay, how did I get here? And how do I get back? What do I need? What did I add to my life that's maybe not helping it? And what do I need to maybe shed from my life in order to get back to a better place? And so he's starting to get back in touch with who he was. But he hasn't changed just yet. Despite all the advice that he's getting from McKeever and from others, he's just like a good human being. There's not so much guidance that God can give us that we can't ignore it and do exactly the opposite. And so one of his schemes was to offer Jim a job down in Bolivia with a really good pay, but bachelors only. And he thinks, that'll get him. That'll get him out of my daughter's life for sure. And so as they're trimming the Christmas tree, they get into this conversation. And he says, I was offered this job at these architects that I went down to see about, hiring them to do the work on this camp that they want to convert to housing. And architecture firm that it turns out O'Connor owns. Yeah, they offered me this job. Of course I'm not going to take it. O'Connor's like, what? Because in his mind, money talks. Money is the motivator. Money is what gets things done. Why would you? Because I don't want to move down to Bolivia. I love it here in the United States. And I got this plan and it's going to work out great. And they get into this little conversation through the Christmas tree. Another great line I really liked. Mike is trying to do the whole, but Bolivia, there's beautiful climate down there, the great opportunity, has lots of tin, and Jim says something like, he goes, well, I like the good old USA, and that ain't tin. It's a corny line. I love the way he delivers it through the branches of this Christmas tree. It was corny, but I enjoyed it. And so again, O'Connor kind of going back to his old life as his wife. He's done the physical labor and he feels great, until the next day when his back completely pops out. I've been there. And so there's this really nice scene. They're in, I guess the room Mary's in at the moment. He's lying on the bed and she has this iron, one of those old fashioned irons that you had to put on the stovetop to get hot. He has like a towel on his back and she's putting the iron on it, kind of like a heating pad, essentially. And she's kind of rubbing his shoulders a little bit. And they're talking about the old days, and reminiscing. And, he's realizing that he really does love her and he really misses her. Now, he's not willing to give up being a pain in the ass yet, but he wants her back. He's starting to get his priorities straight in life. He's not there yet. And it's kind of funny. The scene is interrupted by McKeever, who says, there are kids in this house. We can't have this. Doesn't know that they were once married, of course. Thinks they're just strangers. But he also then advises them about, I'm sorry I broke that up, but, hey, I really do think you two, should get together. A man, he needs a wife. He needs that, that responsibility in his life. He says, that's a mistake I made in my own life. It's too late for me. But maybe you should marry that girl, Mike, and Mary, you should marry him. It's nice. And again, it's laying that groundwork about priorities and what's really important. And those two, they do in fact come together. They decide they're going to get, remarried. Of course, when they announce it to these folks, they're going to get married. Of course, Trudy is extremely happy because that's what she's wanted for her parents in the first place. But Mike's not there yet. Mike's not quite there yet. Because they come to know, some of the scheming he's done. And additionally, that he is in fact the person who's been bidding on this army camp, and he has secured it. And so Jim and his buddies, their whole plan has just fallen apart. And so this is where it comes down to decision time for Mike, because on the one hand, he's now gotten what he initially set out to get. He's got the land, he's got the property, and it looks like Jim is going to be out of luck and not going to be able to marry Mike's daughter. But at the same time, maybe he's not getting everything he really wants, because getting those things is going to disrupt things that he's starting to maybe decide he really wants more. And the party, their little party, is interrupted by the two police officers who have been checking on the mansion. It's another nice scene. As McKeever says, yes, well, we're not really supposed to be here, but we're having a party. And, hey, these folks are just announced they're going to get married. And it sort of touches the hearts of these police officers. And this is where Brophy comes in, actor who was in just about every single movie back in the day that involved gangsters or cops. Another one of the great voices of Hollywood. He has a great line about marriage is a great thing. No family should be without it. And he calls his wife to come over to the party. They've invited her. She doesn't have anything to wear. But ultimately, here they've actually been uncovered by the police. And the police go, okay, but listen, get out of the house, after New Year's, right? Can't let you stay here forever, but you guys are okay. We're not going to tell on you. We're not going to rat you out. A nice scene. And it's, again, it's illustrative of qualities of mercy, of, there's rules, but maybe sometimes you bend the rules to do the right thing. Nice scene, though, and I love Brophy. I'm a big fan of his. And it's at this point now that that Mary finds out what Mike's been up to. And, gentlemen, if it's ever your aim to get on your wife's nerves, you have succeeded when you get the arm fold. Mission accomplished. And she's PO'd and says, you know what? I thought you changed, and I don't think you did, and I don't think you ever will. And so here's decision time for Mike. Because O'Connor's really the main character of this story. And at this point, Jim and Trudy go out to a restaurant. We have a very funny scene with the waiter. I enjoyed it immensely, but where she finds out, Jim is going to take that job in Bolivia. Hey, it's only for a year. It's $12,000. I come back a year later, we can get married then. She's not happy about that, and they have a fight. And again, Mike's getting what he wants. I got the camp. I got Jim out of my daughter's life. What does he really have? This woman that he loves, who doesn't in fact want to remarry him, and a very unhappy daughter. And he does some real soul searching about this, and finally comes to a decision. And so he chats with McKeever, who says, I don't think I'm going to come back to this house next year. And it's funny, O'Connor's kind of like a little offended. What do you mean you're not coming back to my house? What's wrong with my house? He says, well, with everything that's gone on, all the laughter's gone. It's kind of become a place of bad memories for me. It was so good, and now it's just not right anymore. I don't think I'm going to come back. So O'Connor, he talks with Jim. Maybe it was the next day, and says, because Jim's like, I'm going to take the job in Bolivia. What else? Says, well, I just so happens I know a guy who works for this O'Connor guy, and I think maybe you can get that property from him. If you go to his office, I think you can do it. So Jim says, all right, I'm going to give it a shot. See, Jim's an optimist, and he's a boisterous, good-natured guy, and he's very positive. And in his way, a good influence on O'Connor. And so him and his business partners go to meet this guy, and the chair turns around, and there's Mike, the hobo that they've been staying with at this mansion. They're like, "You can't be here," and they pick him up and carry him into the closet. He goes, "If they find you here," and so O'Connor's assistant comes in, and they think that's the guy, and they start talking to him about this, and he goes, "Well, where's Mr. O'Connor?" And, "Well, you're Mr. O'Connor. I'm not Mr. O'Connor." And you hear the pounding on the closet, and lets him out, and they're stunned. They're stunned, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to work this out and get you that army camp. This whole plan I had, I'm throwing it away." Truth be told, he could probably find other land to do it on, but that's a commercial real estate thing. There's always more land to build on. I'm gonna make this happen for you, but look, you got to make sure McKeever doesn't find out who I am. He can't know. He can't know that I've known all along now that he's staying in my... He can't know. I don't want him to know. So everything is now right. And O'Connor has finally got his priorities straight and what's really important. Because he's watched, I have all this wealth, but I'm not happy. Here's these people in my house. They're using my house, and they're happy. I'm not. None of this stuff is giving me any happiness. None of these material goods are making me happy. They're happy. Why can't I be happy? And he's learned the lesson. He's learned the lesson of what's really going to make him happy. Having his wife back in his life, and his daughter, and maybe doing some good in the world. It's not like he's suddenly going to give up being the second richest man in the world. But it's like, okay, material stuff, fine. But you got to get the really important stuff right, or none of that matters. None of it makes any difference. And so he's finally come to this, and it's really nice. And so they have their New Year's Eve party, and where things are sort of squared away. And there's a really nice, touching little speech by McKeever, to everybody. On the night before everybody's going to leave. And he says, I may never see any of you again, but, he wants them to know how much they've meant to him while they've been together. It's really touching. And that next day, they're all packed away. They got everything back in order in the house. And they're saying their goodbyes. And this is where there's a couple great bits here. Number one, well, where are you going? Well, I'm going, since O'Connor's coming back here, I'm going to go down to Virginia. He goes, because that's in the summer I go in the winter I come up to his summer house, and in the summer I go down to his winter house. And O'Connor's kind of like, oh, son of a bitch. So they all say their goodbyes, and it's very touching. And Mary and Mike are the last ones to say goodbye to him. And this is where it finally comes. This is where the little bow is put on top. Because he says to Mary, as they're watching McKeever walk off with Sam, he says, "Mary, remind me to nail up that fence, before next winter." And she says, "What?" He goes, "Because he's coming through the front door next year. He's not sneaking into the house. He's coming through the front door." And that's maybe the most important lesson of all in the movie is gratitude. That's the final thing. Get your things and your priorities straight about what's actually important. It's love, your relationships, your family, your friends. Material stuff has its importance in life. It does. But it's not the most important thing. It's not the most important. And then on top of all that, gratitude. McKeever has shown him the error of his ways in his own inimitable fashion. And for that, Mike is truly grateful. So next year, he's coming through the front door. In other words, I wanted to keep this all a secret from him. No, I have to let him know what he's done for us and how much I value him. It's a beautiful ending to a really touching and poignant film, as we finally say goodbye to Aloysius McKeever and know that we're going to see him the next day too. So it's a great little Christmas movie. Technically, as movie goes, it's got its flaws. There's pacing issues. It's almost like a series of vignettes that are kind of strung together into a story. But I think, I guess I could take the spoilers down now. It's the heart of the story and it's the message that make it great. There's some really, really good performances in it as well. Victor Moore is really good. And Ruggles, I'm a big fan of his, and he's great in it. Good acting throughout, solid acting throughout. This was a production of Monogram, who was primarily known for doing cheap sort of B movies. Memory serves, they did all the Charlie Chan pictures. They make a lot of B movies that I really liked quite a bit. But they created Allied Artists as a new name to make some bigger pictures under. And so this movie was actually had a very high budget for the time. And it paid off for them. And for a long time, this movie was in sort of regular rotation around Christmas time, from the 50s on through into even, I think, the 80s. And then it sort of disappeared. And it came back in 2009 on Turner Classic Movies. And that might be when I saw it. I don't remember. I just remember it was a movie that with a title that I said, I don't know if I like it or not, but what the heck, I'll give it a shot. I might have even seen it first on YouTube, honestly. I don't remember, but it finally, because it's had this avid following the whole time, a kind of a cult movie following, and they finally got it on Turner Classic Movies. And in 2014, I think they started putting it into regular rotation. But it disappeared for quite a long time. And so, yeah, like I say, when I first saw it, I didn't know what it was about. And by the end, I was very, very touched by this movie. It's not a perfect film by any means, but it's a happy, touching little movie, very poignant, and I think well worth watching. During the Christmas season, we need these reminders, right? We need stories about heroism, right? But we also need stories about love, because it's easy to forget and it's easy to get caught up in life and all the nonsense that goes on in life and deadlines and schedules and I need this and I need that and people need this and they need me and sometimes we need to kind of get that little story that elevates us a little bit and maybe brings a little tear to the eye when you start going, wow, I'm so lucky, all the things I have in my life. Or maybe you go, I don't have really the things in my life that I want. I got to figure out how to get them. Maybe I need to shake things up in my life a little bit. And I've been too focused on success and on material things. And maybe I need to be more open. And maybe I need to, be there for other people and build those relationships. And then most importantly, maybe I need to be more thankful for the things that I have in my life. We need those reminders, and Christmas time is a great time to get those reminders about what's really important. And It Happened on Fifth Avenue is a great way to get those reminders. Highly, highly suggest it. It's a movie worth watching, and one maybe you haven't ever heard of. Give it a shot if you could find it out there. Might be playing on Turner Classic Movies this year. I don't know for sure. I'm sure you can find it out there on DVD somewhere. You know, go seek it out. Go give it a try. I think it'll touch you. Hey, maybe it is a movie you've seen, and maybe it's one of your favorites. I'd love to hear if it is in the comments about it, and maybe share some other Christmas movies that are favorites in your house, or things that you remember from your childhood that really get you into that Christmas spirit and really help you remember what it's all about at this time of year. Put that in the comments. I'd love to chat with you about it. If you enjoyed this little review of It Happened on Fifth Avenue, maybe give it a like. That would be groovy. Maybe think of subscribing to the channel and sharing this with some friends who maybe would like to hear about this film and like to maybe add their memories to the comments along with yours. I'd really love it if you do it. It really helps me out, and I really love to share these nice little things that I find out there with other people. In the meantime, God bless everybody, especially in this beautiful Christmas season. Try to be kind to one another, and try to have some fun out there. And I will see you again next time in Dad's Den of Pop Culture.